This podcast is brought to you by Hoare Chartered Accountants. Hoare Chartered Accountants are based in Galway City and are a leading provider of audit, accountancy and taxation services. For more information, visit hoarecharteredaccountants.ie. Oh, you're welcome along to the Maroon and White pod. So it's Cork up for Galway this weekend. The winner goes through to the Allianz Hurling League final against Tipperary, and it's probably hard to believe in one sense Galway are here, but they have to make the most of the opportunity as well coming up this weekend. Saturday evening in Páirc at 7:30, Galway will take on Cork. Just before we do that, lads, obviously, Athenry, they were in action and just absolute devastation for them against Turles CBS there in the Crow Cup final on Paddy's Day. Just coming to you first, Michael Foley. It's some game of hurling on Monday in Everton, but just devastation for Athenry to lose that game so narrowly.
Oh yeah, sure. Look, it's heartbreaking to lose any game, but especially when you're that age and that final is so huge. It's a massive thing. I suppose it's like anything. I suppose for those players now, it's how they bounce back now and kind of take for what it was, and hopefully in time to come they'll kind of look back on the occasion and the opportunity to even get to that final. Because for a lot of for unfortunately for a share of them, it's the day that'll be the biggest day, so you like to keep good memories from these things as well. They'll be gutted obviously this week now, but I'm sure they got a huge amount from the campaign and getting there, and the experience and everything else will stand to them in all sorts of ways.
And Tom Kenny, they were 8 points up at one stage. They probably will wonder how they did lose that one in the end as well.
Yeah, I suppose as Michael said there, it's a moment in time for them in terms of their where they are in their career, and they can't see past that. I remember playing Harty final against Flannans way back in 1999, and we were up 7 or 8 points at half time as well the same day, and we actually lost by 5 or 6. And for a while you can't see beyond that, but I think as they leave school and go into third level education and further afield, they'll realise that it was a big building block for them and a stepping stone in their career. While they might have wanted to win, it would have been super, but at the same time, the experience and getting there in a way makes them winners and will stand in good stead as they go on further in their career.
Tom, we obviously lost the club finals to Paddy's Day, but from that spectacle alone, the Turles and Prez produced there at the weekend, it definitely seems that it could potentially fill a gap with these schools finals.
Yeah, I think so. Given it was such fine weather this weekend for Paddy's Day that it was nearly the first time I was saying, God, you'd love the old club finals to be on. But when the colleges finals were on, yeah, it definitely filled the gap in terms of, people watching TV and sitting down. It was always a big tradition watching the club finals over the years. And I remember going to a few when Newtown were there. But even in that split season, I think while we have a split season, I think there's definite scope for extending the club finals another week or two, because they run into January anyway, the senior finals especially. I know that the junior and intermediate are very early January, but you could easily get another week or two by pushing the senior finals back. And I don't believe it would affect senior intercounty teams too much. Like, players are playing to a very good level. They might miss 3 or 4 weeks of pre-season, but they get up to speed pretty quickly nowadays in terms of fitness. Players nowadays are looking after themselves wholesale, but definitely those colleges finals fill a gap. And with the new football rules probably being implemented next year, it might even be a better spectacle again in football terms.
Yeah, obviously, just commiserations there to Pres Athenry at the weekend. They should be so proud of their efforts. They gave it all, just coming up short, and to Cala Sanchez College as well in the Senior B final. The two Galway schools beaten there at the weekend, but huge achievement to get there. Michael, from a Galway sense, Cork coming up this weekend, and we probably are wondering how we're in this position of one game away from a league final when you consider the Tip and Limerick games, but it's an opportunity too.
Yeah, absolutely. And fair play to you, Paul. You're carrying the maroon and white passport very well there, playing the bail book. Fair play to you. I'm just so happy you're going to come down with 15 players, and
Yeah,
so long as you don't get lost on the way or get stuck in traffic or whatever, the usual.
yeah.
Uh, but
If you can just help us out.
yeah, listen, you're very good to come down. But no, look, it's yeah, you're right. Like, I mean, if you looked at the fixtures and you looked at the situation for Galway coming into it, you were kind of wondering mean, first, I mean, it was survival, really, wasn't it? Like, I mean, and I know that's the baseline for all the teams, but particularly for a team with Galway's profile at the minute, where they were coming from last season, and then probably getting. I thought they got caught in the hop a bit by Tipperary in the first game, to be honest, because anything that was kind of coming out, if anybody pays any attention to these things, it was that Tip mightn't have been going so great over the winter time and coming into the league. Now, obviously, they picked it up big time since, and they're in the league final. But from a Galway perspective, like you could see going into the next game against Kilkenny, they absolutely they brought back some serious people. The idea of losing a couple of games on the spin and putting themselves into bother was not a thing. So that middle block, really, Kilkenny, Clare, Wexford, the way they beat Kilkenny and laid on good performance against Clare or whatever. We could talk about Clare some other time, where they were at, and then Wexford. Anything after that then was sort of, well, let's see how we go. Didn't think they were great against Limerick. I think when maybe there was a little sign there that when the accelerator is pushed, and again, it's an evolving team, that this is, things like that will happen, where they just never looked to me like they were going to get into that game, couldn't figure a way out, or they just didn't hurl well at all. They've tried a lot of players. I mean, I think I counted up, I mean, give or take one or two, I think it's about 37 players they've tried this league, which is massive numbers. So look, they're there. It's a one-off. I would argue, probably, if I was looking at it from the outside in, you would say that Cork to me are like the Galway footballers now. They're in that space now where you need to win stuff. You're in that groove. You've got the squad together. There's a good atmosphere. It's time to win now, for fear that the moment will pass. So there may be a little bit more sort of, if there's ever any more for any other team riding on a league game, maybe there's a little bit more on this for Cork than Galway in some respects, which you might play against Galway on the night, and plus being down in Cork. But look, it's a one-off. It would be going into championship. Obviously, if they can get a performance out down in Páirc in front of a big crowd, against a team that's going well, sure, it'll be huge. It'll be huge for Galway in every which way.
It's the thing, Michael, isn't it? Like, Galway need to react from the Limerick performance this weekend.
Which would they have done, to be fair? Like the Kilkenny game, they reacted. Now, they made a lot of changes, as I say, looking at the teams and looking at the players. They brought back a lot of established players, people that you've been kind of more familiar with, maybe. I mean, by the time they get to the Limerick game, I would have thought that Micheál Donoghue was sending out a team where he kind of thought, well, 10, 11 of these are my championship team now, or quite close to it. Even though I do think, looking at the players he's picking and where he's putting them, the championship team Galway will have this year is still going to look very different from last year's in many respects. So what I'm saying is, I suppose, I don't know how much more he can switch around. It'll be interesting to see the team. In terms of personnel, maybe it is a case of just saying to the lads who are there, look, we just need to be better now. This is the standard that eventually we want to reach. So let's see what you've got and see how it goes. But I would expect a response from Galway. I mean, they're in this situation for a reason. It's not luck that they're in with a shot at making the league final. They've done well this spring. I'd say overall, Donoghue's probably happy with what he's seen. Again, it's just those you'd always like to see a team taking a little step up when they come up against a team like Limerick or Cork and where they are, that you're able to sort of hold your own and maybe be in there down the stretch with 10 minutes to go and see what happens. So I'm sure that's what he'll be looking for again.
Tom, what have you made of Galway so far?
Like, I suppose you could make the comparison to, going slightly off topic, with, we said, Jim McGuinness, so during last week or so, has been talking about the football rules, and it's put teams back to year one who might be further down their development. And Micheál Donoghue was in his first year back, I suppose, and like, I'd imagine he's very, very happy with where Galway are in the moment in terms of going into the last round of the league, chance of league qualification to a final. Okay, had 2 defeats, but at the same time, as Michael said, they're using 37 players. It's a fine-edged sword that he needed to see his panel throughout the league and be competitive. The last thing he wanted to be was down in the relegation with no wins from 5 or 1 win from 5 or whatever. And, people questioning and putting pressure on him. So I imagine he'll be very, very happy where he is, and he'll be beginning to say, "Yeah, I've the nucleus of a team formulating in my head." Like we were saying before we came on air there, Paul, I can't see any reason why Galway won't go for this league final as well. They have a 2 week break to a league final, get to a league final, leave a 2 week game to match against Kilkenny, and after that, then I suppose they have a run of fixtures in Leinster without being disrespectful to anyone, where you probably expect them to win those games, albeit one or two of them away. So he's getting a good quality game against Cork down in Páirc, Super Valley Páirc Keeve this weekend. And I imagine he'll be looking for a couple of more answers to his puzzle that he wants to put together for championship. But yeah, like Michael said, first day out against Tipperary, I would have expected them to win. And maybe Tipperary have trained hard and have big motivation to do well in the league. And that come championship, it might be a step too far for Tipperary. But on the other side with Galway, I think they're building it up towards a championship assault. So they'll use this game as a kind of a championship preparation for them.
It's a good point you make there, Tom, for both sides this weekend. Like, it's not like where you go to the football and for a Donegal, for instance, if you get to a league final, then you're playing Derry a week later. There's 2 weeks between each game, and for Galway playing Kilkenny and for Cork playing Clare in the first game, they're going to be competitive games. So a league final won't do either of these sides any harm.
I don't think so in the sense, should Cork or Galway lose at the weekend, they have a 4 week break, let's say, to their first round of the championship. And from experience, this is 10 or 15 years ago now, 4 weeks is kind of nearly in between. You can't go too heavy in training for too long because it'll be in your legs, and you don't want to ease off too early because you won't be sharp enough then. So like I imagine the weekend of the league final, if Cork were in it, for example, I imagine Galway will be playing some kind of internal game and a heavy training session that would just be as heavy as actually playing league final. And I suppose noticeably, let's Cork and Clare a couple of weeks ago in Cusack Park. You had David McInerney making his first return, Conor Cleary making his first return, Tommy O'Connell from Cork making his first return to play. And there's no substitute for matches in terms of after 30, 35 minutes, those three players were quite leggy in my view. Tommy O'Connell was taken off at half time. He did an ocean of work in the first half. I thought Conor Cleary for Clare was in trouble and David McInerney also. But that game will stand to them as opposed to a training session. They'll know where they are. So, like that, you run the risk of getting to a league final and suffering a hammering or an off day or whatever, and questions going to championship. But on the other side of the coin, there's no substitute for a top quality game 2 weeks out from your championship. And I suppose given a split season and the way the games are now, that's what players want. We've always been crying out for more games than training. Back 15 years ago, I remember you'd finish your league the first weekend in April and you would be playing again till the end of June or something like that, depending on the draw. And you'd be only itching for a match and you'd be going up on a Tuesday night somewhere to play a practice match. So, playing a league final 2 weeks out from the championship can only be the ideal preparation in my view.
Michael, just on this, because from being in Páirc Uí over the last year or so, witnessing this Cork team in particular has obviously got the Cork public behind them, and the support has been something else, even for league games. Where do you think that has come from to get this amount of support behind this team?
Oh, I think it's the Limerick game last year. Very simple. Very, very simple. And I think the fact that they've had a lot of Saturday night games. It's a great kind of springboard into the rest of the Saturday night and into the weekend. If it's not a springboard into the weekend, but you know what I mean. It's a good kind of thing to hang your weekend on for a lot of people to go to the game and head out afterwards or whatever to do whatever. Like, so there's that element to it. There was definitely last year I felt there was something that you don't see in GA very often. You see it more in rugby. Really, is a kind of an event sense about it, that we're going because we're hearing about it in work or people are talking about it around the street, and we're going because it's something we want to, other people are going to, you know what I mean? It's not so much, you'll always have your hardcore Cork support, and Cork will always carry a decent sized hurling support, so that's fine. But just I think the Limerick game last year, down in Páirc Uí Chaoimh, the Munster Championship game, was the one where, particularly when you consider what the Munster Championship had looked like for Cork before that, against Waterford and Clare and all the rest of it. That was the one that was the catalyst, I think, for what's followed since, and just the sheer exhilaration of the game as a spectacle, the fact that Cork won, and everything that followed on from that then, it's carried on into this spring. And it's an interesting one because I think it's a different kind of expectation. You'd love to know kind of how the players and the management are finding it, because like it's been 20 years since Cork won an All-Ireland. Very rarely, really, in that 20 years, has there been the sort of expectation that's there now. It's a different kind of enthusiasm, excitement, whatever you want to call it, you know. It's not something that a generation of Cork players have had to really, like, they have been in All-Ireland finals, obviously 21, 2013. There would have been expectation then, but the kind of sustained sort of feeling that this team is going to do something, they're on the road to something, they will win an All-Ireland kind of feeling that's there, you know, which of course it doesn't always work out that way. And it's something that you've got to sort of, it's another thing to manage, you know. So it would be, I'd love to know what it's like from that side of things, from the players' point of view and the management point of view. But look, all they can do, I suppose, is just keep doing what they're doing. I think it's been a decent league for Cork, all told. Like I said earlier, I think I would imagine, without kind of, you know, putting a big red circle around it, I'm sure that winning a league title would have been something in the back of Pat Ryan's mind, going, yeah, that'd be handy. Lost, you know, some of this group have lost a couple of All-Irelands now. It would be good to get a national title on the board. It's a stepping stone. And to kind of dig out a few more players and get the thing going. And they've certainly created options for themselves again. I would actually say, looking across the board, if you're looking at kind of contenders for All-Irelands and things, I would have thought that Cork and Limerick are the two teams at that end of the conversation that are going to come out the happiest from this league in terms of the options they've developed, and see how it goes. But yeah, and again, from what I've heard, there's ticket sales are good again for Saturday night. There's going to be a healthy crowd down there. There's no football game on afterwards for them for the Cork support to embarrass themselves by all walking out en masse. So it should be a good night, all told.
For both the, like, Cork racking up 620 against Clare. At the moment, are Cork favourites to win the All-Ireland in your eyes?
I wouldn't say so, Paul. And that's not playing the bail buck, as Michal said earlier, but like that day against Clare, scoring 620, while they got 6 goals, was fantastic. Clare looked very leggy to me from the word go. Maybe they've decided to train through the league. They won the league in the All-Ireland last year, and retaining the All-Ireland might be their goal. But at the moment, Clare didn't seem at the pitch of where they need to be for championship. So I think it's a small bit skewed from that view, that while Cork's performance was very, very good, Clare were below where they should be in terms of playing. You go back to the Limerick game in Sioux Valley Park last night, and while Cork got a draw, I thought they were very lucky to get a draw. There was maybe two and a half minutes extra played there at the end that probably shouldn't have been played, and even the free at the end was very, very soft. So at the moment, I'd say, you know, Limerick are quite happy at the moment. Probably disappointed with their result last weekend, but they've unearthed a couple of players that have been knocking around the place over the last number of years, that are beginning to step into the first 15, let's say. Aidan O'Connor, Colin Coughlin, to name it, and put 2. So I imagine they're still front runners, given the credit they've built up over the last number of years. Unless Clare have decided to play or train through the league, I'm not sure they'll be at the business end of the season. And then after that, Cork are definitely next in terms of their development. As Michael said, the depth they've developed, and the wellness of support behind them, I suppose. Galway in year 1, Tipperary in a way, while they're in year 2, are still relatively new. Darren McCarthy's only just out of minor, so it's an awful lot of pressure to be putting on his shoulders going into the championship season. They expect him to carry Tipperary to an All-Ireland success. I imagine they would be happy winning a National League, but I think Limerick, given what they've done over the last 6 or 7 years, are up there as favourites. And then after that, probably Cork and a few others. But I don't think you can say yet Cork are favourites, because they haven't got over that finish line over the last number of years.
Yeah, I'd agree with Tom 100%. Like, I mean, the other thing as well, that, you know, it's gas how the league goes. You know, it's always the same conversations this end of the year, and we're always and ever guilty of putting too much on the league. You know, putting too much kind of emphasis on what we see. It doesn't matter all through the years. It doesn't matter what way they reshape the league format to inject more. kind of urgency into it, more whatever you want to call it, not drama, but kind of more importance into it, put more weight on it. You still get erratic results. You get stuff that's kind of mad looking results. Like that Limerick result last weekend was insane. Given all that had gone before, there was that came out of absolutely nowhere. The Tip Galway game at the very beginning of the season. Look, you always get kind of freak results on an opening weekend, but that was particularly freaky. Like that Cork Clare game again, as Tom says, and for the reasons he outlined. I mean, what can you read into it really? And it's the same. Like, I mean, teams come in regardless of the format, regardless of kind of what kind of value we're trying to put on the league as a competition. Teams are sorting themselves out. They're figuring stuff out. Guys are at different levels of training, different levels of injury profile, form issues, all sorts of stuff that can flip around in a couple of weeks or can go the other direction. So at the end of the day, like when you're trying to kind of, I think anyway, when you're trying to kind of draw lines about or pick all Ireland contenders at this time of year, you're really drawing lines from last year again, and kind of going, well, how are those teams going now? And all in all, like Cork are where they more or less were. Limerick are more or less where they were with a bit of added value from those players that Tom mentioned, plus more. It'll be very interesting to see what Clare will be like, because I mean, just looking at them, you do get the feeling that they're front loading everything into Munster, because they've never, and indeed, when they got their All Ireland medals, Gerald Nan made a speech at their All Ireland medal handing out social, whatever you call it, banquet, isn't it? Banquet. And he made the point that Munster has been a black spot for Clare over the years. And so perhaps there's an element there that, to try and keep guys focused and try and hone them in and, avoid kind of getting kind of obsessed about two in a row and defending your title at All Ireland level. There's Munster here to be won, so we're putting our eggs in that basket and let's see how we are after it, So there's so many variables, particularly in the springtime. As I say, I mean, you look at the Cork team, and I think it's to Cork's credit that you could probably look at the team and go, there's probably still 3 or 4 spots there that you couldn't say for sure who's going to be in them, which I think is some going. Given that they got to an All Ireland final last year that they did not win, so there is competition there. Limerick the same, Clare again. We'll see where they're at. So yeah, it's kind of where you were last year really, and you'd be hoping that the likes of Tip and Galway will pull up to that front pack, because if they do, it's going to be an absolute dinger altogether. I'm expecting a great championship anyway, but it'd be a real dinger if the likes of Tip and Galway could kind of pull within reach of Cork, Limerick and Clare.
Yeah, it's a good point you make about the league, because even last week Kilkenny 4-1 before the game, probably labelled all week as an average Kilkenny team, and then they overturn Limerick by 9 points. So it just shows the nature of the league.
It's forever thus. It's like you could go back to any era of the league. I mean, you could go back to the late 90s when Clare were being accused of training on the Sunday mornings of league semi-finals, somehow trying to hobble themselves, which was all rubbish. But they were probably, in modern parlance, they were probably just training through a league. They were doing things with a view to June, whatever, and there will be days where, you see it. I mean, you saw it even in the football last weekend with Kerry and Armagh. I mean, that was clearly a game that both teams targeted, and it was like two bulls bouncing off each other, and it just happened that Kerry were in a slightly better position. So teams will target games and will want to be at kind of somewhere near championship level, and will put teams out to reflect that. But ultimately, you won't know. Unfortunately, you won't know for a week or two into championship where everybody is at, and then all of a sudden we look back at the league and we'll be complete experts about what we're talking about now.
And Tom, like, how do Galway go about going at this Cork team at the weekend? Because probably the most worrying thing from the Limerick game was the space Galway left in their full back line and the space that Limerick full forward line got. And if you look at the Clare game, Cork were able to mix it between their running game and going long. So how do Galway go about this weekend?
Well, I think the first thing, they have to bring a level of physicality and aggression to the game within the rules of the game. We've seen over the last number of weeks many high head tackles, and any instance of a knock to the head, be it a hurley, a hand, or a shoulder, you're entering red card territory straight away. So Galway need to bring a level of aggression to Mark Cork, because I've always felt, even from my own playing days, if Cork were playing tip and you stood off tip, we'll say, for example, say, tip would be fantastic. They'd spray the ball around the place and they get huge scores. But you knew if you got up close and personal with them and tried to get down and dirty, for example, that it's a different style of game. And they probably felt the same playing with us, that if you were loose around Cork players, then, you know, we could tip the ball around the place and do whatever with it. But if you got up close and physical, like Kilkenny did over the years, then it's a different result of the game. And I think definitely Galway need to bring that kind of controlled aggression to the fight on Saturday night. You know, Limerick bought on a wet, dirty evening in early February, sorry. And while it wasn't a spectacle from hurling, it was a spectacle from gladiators fighting, you know, and I think that's what Galway need to bring. Not sure whether Galway will bring a good support down from on Saturday night. Cork will almost definitely have at least 20,000 there, 15 to 20,000, I imagine. So they will have the crowd on their back, Cork, and any good bit of play like we saw with Diarmuid Healy against Kilkenny, and they'll rise to their feet. He was nearly like a new star that night. But I think the one thing Galway do need to bring is that aggression in the game, in terms of not giving Cork forwards, especially a sniff of the ball, you know, that you're right up close. You don't have to be out in front and win the ball, but you just tip it away and tap it onto the next line and get the next player to pick up the break and things like that. But Cork are definitely able at the moment to mix it, be it long or short or running game. Niall O'Leary, cornerback, I think, is having a fantastic game. The Cork defence is better structured with Rob Downey centre back and Kieran Joyce on the right hand side. I feel when Kieran is centre back, he tries to do too many jobs, whereas he can just focus on his number 5 job. And up the field, then obviously, like, we haven't seen Seamus Harnedy at the moment. We only saw a snippet of Mark Coleman. So it's interesting, like Michael said there, while Cork have a depth of riches in a way, it's still all about putting square pegs in square holes as such, to make sure that you put them into the right position. And players would be disappointed after that. Much like Galway, I imagine Paul and Micheál Dunn was picking his team, that some players might be there on form, but you need to pick the players that suit the style of play and suit the structure. And but the one thing I think Galway need to bring on Saturday night is bring a bit of fight, get a good start to the game for 10 or 15 minutes, keep the Cork crowd quiet, and that'll go a long way to seeing whether they want to qualify for a league final or not then.
Is Fitzgibbon the one player that they need to go after?
Well, interestingly, for me, I think Shane Barrett is actually playing really, really well centre forward. He mightn't be up in lights at the moment in terms of scores, but I think Cork play really, really well with Shane Barrett centre forward, Darragh Fitzgibbon midfield. At the moment, they seem to be pushing Darragh up to centre forward and accommodating, say, Tommy O'Connell midfield, or not Tommy O'Connell, sorry, Tim O'Mahony. Luke Meade hasn't really seen much game time, so in a way, I think Shane Barrett and Darragh Fitzgibbon are two key components for Cork players. He played centre forward against Clare last week, and he didn't actually score. I don't think I have my notes there, but I don't think he actually scored. He was Cork's top scorer to that point. So he is a midfielder, I think, but sometimes Cork play better with him midfield, Shane Barrett centre forward. But whether they move that around now is another thing. If he is centre forward, then I think sometimes he gets small bit nullified. Whereas midfield, when you're in midfield, you have freedom to kind of say, right, look, I'm going to play my game. You come and mark me unless you're given a specific job. And that's the way I think Darragh Fitzgibbon plays it. He plays loose, he plays around the field. He doesn't necessarily track every run going. And it kind of suits him midfield. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing from his side of the view. But yeah, maybe he is a key component. But I think definitely even Rob Downey centre back from a Galway perspective, if you can move Rob around the place from centre back, then you're opening up the Cork defence. He's nearly old school as a centre back. He plays the position, and anything that comes down, and he's not afraid to let himself. He's 6'4" or 5" like that. He's not afraid to throw his weight around the place either. So maybe centre back and midfield, whoever is there in personnel, are two areas to kind of move around Cork.
Yeah, like I think that's one thing as well. Like that, if you're going to take anything from the league, if any team is going to take anything from the league, it might sound obvious too, but you do want to have your spine more or less sorted out, or your core, which I think Cork have. I think the thing with Darragh Fitzgibbon and the combination of Darragh Fitzgibbon and Tim O'Mahony is interesting at midfield for a lot of the reasons Tom mentioned there. You wouldn't have necessarily said that will be your 8 and 9, given the options they have, but it seems to work really, really well, particularly for Fitzgibbon. It gives him great freedom. And I mean, he has been outstanding for most of this league, you know. Um, again, and Rob Downey the same at centre back. It's kind of all there for them. And from a Galway perspective, actually, Paul, I do think like from what I've seen, they're more or less picking the same midfield pairing all the time. So
Yeah.
it'll
And there's
be
even been, they're kind of picking between 4 or 5 players that they've picked through over the last few years, really, in midfield as well.
Yeah. So like there's a bit of variance there. Again, it'll be interesting to see who they stick in there on those two now. If Cork pick Tim O'Mahony and Darragh Fitzgibbon there, depending on what way they want him jumping around. But um again, if you look at the Galway team and what they're doing, a lot of those central positions appear to be fairly well nailed down. Half back line seems to be nailed down. Centre forward, full back, midfield. You know, they kind of have it. They have that kind of sorted. Goalie's probably sorted at this point. Like so, again, they're coming down with that much, and it on a day when they'll come down to a very hostile atmosphere. Uh, Insofar as any league atmosphere can be hostile, but there won't be many Galway people there anyway. Um, and it's going to be a day for work rate, as Tom said. It's going to be Galway will have to try and disrupt, be very aggressive in their faces in a way that they tried to be against Limerick, but they were a bit imprecise and a bit inaccurate with that, both technically and physically, which cost them. And they made a share of mistakes in defence as well. Then it was almost like they were almost like kind of not so much trying to do things too quickly, but it was kind of everything was just kind of couldn't quite get themselves to the right pace mentally and physically to actually compete with Limerick. You know, they knew what they had to do, but it was almost like their mind was running too quickly or something like that, and they ended up making mistakes and things got away from them. It'll be another lesson now. You know, this will be another lesson in that how to kind of manage yourself in situations like this, where you would imagine that Cork will have spells where they're coming at Galway in waves. How are you going to manage that? And vice versa as well. I mean, Galway have some very good forwards. The guys who came off the bench against Limerick did well. Now the game was a bit gone from them, but you know, Concannon did well. Other lads did well when they come off the bench. They've always had good, again, aggressive, strong, snappy forwards. And again, if they get momentum going, it'll be a good test for Cork's kind of individual backs to see how they get on. But again, as Tom says, the structure is very good in the Cork defence at the minute. The thing that Cork were probably a bit concerned about early doors in the league was scoring goals. That was clearly rectified against Clare. For whatever about how Clare were going, they took their goal chances, and that was a positive from a Cork perspective. So there's still boxes to be ticked for both teams, really. You know,
Would you see Galway sticking with the combination of Keenan Fahey and David Burke midfield?
Um, yeah, like I know Tom Manahan has played out there a small bit. I quite like Tom Manahan as a wing forward.
mm,
He always seems to get himself into position to get a couple of scores. You know, as a defender, if you're marking wing forward that kind of plays his own little patch, it's easy enough. But when you have a fella running across the field and running back into his defence and coming back here, you know, it's very difficult to manage. And even if Tom Manhan stepped into midfield, while Darragh Fitzgibbon plays that loose role, all of a sudden it would give Tim O'Mahony a bit of thinking to do in terms of, do I need to sit and follow this fella? Can I stay midfield and let Darragh off? Because if I go off following Tom Manhan, what's going to happen in the middle of the field then? So, you know, they're the kind of questions that Micheál O'Donoghue and his selectors will need to consider. I imagine he might go back to the tried and trusted, as you said, Paul, going down to Páirc on Saturday night. But as I said, I quite like Tom Manhan as a player. He gets around the place and he picks up ball and he's able to pick up a score. And it would just give the Cork midfielders a bit more food for thought throughout the game. And it will be interesting there. And even just discussing slightly what Michael said there as well, you know, depending on how the game plays out, you know, one mistimed tackle after 5 minutes by any player, would say a Cork player, could throw a total spanner in the works from a Cork perspective. Similar to Galway, you know, they might be winning by 3 or 4 points after 10 or 12 minutes, mistimed tackle, red card, and the game all of a sudden is going to peter out as it ventures into the 60th, 70th minute. So, you know, it's very important that in the league, as you said, Micheál, or Michael, sorry, that you're training for championship, but obviously you're still playing matches. So your body might be tired, your mind might be tired, or vice versa. Or you might be a bit fresh in your mind, tired in your body, and you're trying to do things and it's just not quite happening. So it'll be interesting to see if both management teams decide, right, let's target this semi-final, let's put all our eggs into winning this semi-final. And in a way, it's nearly a dry run for a championship match. Galway are coming down to Cork. There's going to be 25,000 people there. Going to Wexford Park, going to Nolan Park, Dublin coming to Galway or whatever. It's a dry run. It's nearly a free shot at championship preparation. So for me, I think both teams should take it. But to go back to your original question, I'd like to see Tom Monaghan, if I was a Galway supporter, out in the middle of the field and to see, can he give the two Cork midfielders food for thought.
Yeah, because interesting, he played wing forward against Limerick, so it'll be interesting to see what they do with him. Obviously, Conor Whelan picks up a shoulder injury against Limerick, and if it's any what serious at all, you would think he's not going to be risked at all this weekend. But the encouraging signs, Michael, then Brian Concannon and Carl Mannion come in, and they're going to be two names that are going to be on the championship 15 regardless.
Yeah, when you look at the options that Galway have inside in terms of the inside line, they're good. They are good. There's plenty of lads to pick from. Anthony Burns has come through as well. This league look very, very good. So yeah, that's the thing with them. There is no. It's again, it was ever thus. There's no shortage of good hurlers in Galway, and there's no shortage of good aggressive forwards either, with a bit of cut to them. So yeah, but Conor Whelan, just when you mention him, would be obviously an enormous loss, particularly given the kind of the transition that Galway are going through at the minute, trying to put a team together. And he's one guy that you could build something around, So hopefully the shoulder isn't as bad as might be feared, But yeah, as you say, look, the guys who came off the bench the last day, and again, big health warning because the game was kind of gone from them, but they did very, very well when they came in. They kind of brought that bit of aggression and stuff, and kind of aggression was there early, but kind of more sort of targeted aggression, well targeted aggression that was kind of needed really on the night. And Concannon in particular, I thought it was very, very good when he came in, knocked his threes over, did very well,
And Paul, sorry if Galway, I imagine they will look at the video of Cork and Clare, if you weren't there, if you were watching on TV or saw the highlights that night, Owen Downey was actually in a spot of bother with Peter Duggan when he came on. Peter Duggan was very physical in full forward. Owen Downey got a yellow card straight away. The Cork management warmed up Damien Keala, and immediately he was actually very lucky that as the ball was coming in from Clare, I'd say 60 seconds later, Owen Downey was still hanging off Peter Duggan, but Clare hit the ball the other way, and the referee either turned a blind eye to it or didn't actually see it. But he was very lucky that the ball didn't come into him because he was on a yellow, he was on a foul again, and he was bordering another one. So I imagine Galway will look at that and say, right, we can target, even though he's an all-star full-back, we can target him in terms of getting at him physically. I think the shortage of years in Owen Downey showed that day against Peter Duggan in that he, even after the yellow card, he tried to play him the exact same way the next 2-3 balls that went in, as opposed to just standing off him and using his skill set to try and stop him getting in on goal. So I imagine Galway will look at that as well and say, this quite possibly could be an area where we could target, even though he's currently the all-star full-back. I thought for that 10-15 minutes when Peter Duggan came in, O'Downey was in a spot or bother for Cork.
Is someone like Conor Cooney that could be the challenge for Downey there this weekend?
I think so, yeah. I think quite physically, yeah, he could be. Conor Cooney's able to move around the place as well, and he's strong and physical again. Like Michael said, he needs to control his aggression in terms of red cards and high hits, but he will definitely give Owen Downey food for thought throughout the game. And I imagine quite possibly see a lot of ball going in towards Conor Cooney, who will be able to hold off Owen Downey and pluck out his own ball. Owen Downey is very good at catching ball overhead, as is his brother Rob, given the height of them. But any inter-county management worth their salt obviously will look back at previous videos of teams, and that'll be one instance I think that Galway will target this Sunday, or Saturday night, sorry.
Michael, do you find it strange when you look at Galway's free-taking options at the minute? Tiernan Killeen takes frees against Wexford, Conor Cooney takes them against Limerick, and then you have this 95% free-taker, Evan Nyland, left on the bench.
Yeah, it's a wealth of riches there. Again, I suppose it's probably going to be a farm thing. I mean, I don't think we've seen much of Evan
No,
Nyland this
very little.
very, very little of them actually. Now that you mention them, So yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I suppose Cork. It was interesting from a Cork perspective. Actually, Patrick Corkin came on in a couple of games and didn't automatically take over the frees either, which was interesting to see.
Yeah.
It's a good thing to see. Like, I mean, there may be all sorts of reasons for that. Not talking about Cork particularly, maybe in the Galway side of things, just trying to get a bit of confidence into a guy. Give him a job, get a few scores on the board beside his name. But again, I suppose the fact that the Galway team, in our eyes anyway, don't know what Micheál Donoghue was thinking. Maybe it's all settled in his head, but looking from the outside in, it's in a slight state of flux. So I wouldn't imagine that anybody will be getting onto the team by virtue the very fact that they have so many free takers. They're not going to have a free taker. They're not going to be carrying one, if you know what I mean. They have options, which is a good place to be. And no harm either, no harm either for Evan Nyland to see that those other guys can knock frees over and just maybe prods him on a little bit if needs be. But look, again, I mean, I've said this a few times now in this conversation. Like, Galway are not short of options. It's just kind of more the fact that they're starting back with Micheál Donoghue, who has done an outstanding job before, and I'm sure will do a very granular and detailed job again in terms of putting this team together and playing a certain style in a certain way. They have plenty of players. It's just a matter of getting that formula together. When you look at the players, when you look at the guys who played against Dublin in the last round of the championship last year, most of them have been knocking around again this league. But at the same time, when you look at where they've been playing, where our guys have been lining out, it could be a very different looking team, while still carrying a fair share of experience in and around it. And I suppose again, it's like anything in these situations. It's how those guys who maybe who are maybe kind of more sure of their place in the last couple of years, who may not be there or maybe asked to do a different job, how they react to that, how they respond could be very important in terms of how the whole squad goes forward. But yeah, no, it's interesting times. I mean, I wouldn't again. Galway, I say again, being dark horses is something that Galway have done for a long, long time over, for long stretches over the years, and they're kind of back in that situation again now.
And I suppose one other thing, Paul, from a Galway perspective, from experience with UCC against NUIG in different Fitzgibbon Cup games, we beat NUIG down the Mardyke this year in the Fitzgibbon Cup game, and truth be told, Galway probably should have had 6 or 7 more points at half time. That I won't say their shot selection was poor, but just the execution of the shot selection was poor. That, without giving away trade secrets, Donald O'Grady used to always say years ago, just have that bit of composure when you're taking your shot in front of the post. If it's not on, it's not on. But if it's on, take that extra split second to make sure. And I think that's one thing Galway probably need to look at, just in terms of, you often see them get themselves back into a game and then small things let them down. That if they take that small bit of composure, I think they could be right in the mix here on Saturday night. The aforementioned
the shooting really let them down against Limerick, like.
Yeah, and it might be an old failing of theirs there, where they're just not taking that split second extra to make sure they drive the ball over the bar and be clinical and composed with their shot selection. And as I said, if it's not on, then it's not on. You take the ball on or you pass it on. But that, if they can correct that, which I'm sure Micheál Donoghue is addressing, and looking at past videos of Cork and saying, right, can we target here X, Y, and Z, then they will have good opportunities. Much like Cork on the other side, I imagine they look at the Galway team and say, right, Diarmuid Healy didn't play against Clare for personal reasons in terms of being very close to that boy from Minton. And, Cork might look and say, and Diarmuid Healy look at Páirc Mannion and say, right, let's see who he gets on here against Páirc Mannion, Galway will obviously try and negate that then, but these are little small things that play out in management's heads during the week to see how can they influence the game. And but just for me, that small bit from a Galway perspective, can they be that bit more composed in their execution of what's at hand?
Michael, we've obviously talked as well about the Limerick game, and probably wasn't up to scratch, but in one way, do you think that can be a good reset for Galway coming into this weekend?
I suppose, yeah. I mean, look, I wouldn't have imagined that any of the players and the management thought we have it sorted after they beat Wexford to win their 3rd league game in a row. You know what I mean? I doubt if that was anywhere near part of the mindset. They knew going to Limerick that this was going to be another step up, and And Limerick had something to play for as well on the night, just to get themselves up the table and kind of just, get rid of any half notions about relegation or any kind of silliness. So, like, they would have known that it was they were going into something that was really going to test them. Is it a reset? I would have thought that the broad scope of the challenge isn't so much different from what they faced in Limerick in terms of going away from home again into a ground where you're going to have a vast majority of the home support. There's going to be home support. Uh, Trying to do a lot of the similar things that they would have tried to do against Limerick, which is be aggressive, get in Cork's faces, upset their patterns of play, upset their key men, and try and target a few guys. In ways, it doesn't really change. As I say, it'll be. I mean, we're at this end of the week. We don't know what the team is going to be. It will be very interesting to see what kind of a team to pick. And as Tom said, it's a very good point. Actually, I think it's a really good opportunity for Galway in terms of just it's like a dress rehearsal really for a Leinster Championship game going down to Kilkenny or somewhere, going here and just seeing how guys react again. We've seen how they react against Limerick. Is that like again? You don't put an enormous amount of stock in league games, but if it happens twice in a row against similar opposition in a similar scenario, well then you will Micheál Donoghue will have some decisions to make in that regard then if he's looking at guys, and I'm sure that's not what he wants. And so in ways, while getting to a league final mightn't be the be all and end all, he will definitely want to see a reaction, and I would say he will definitely want to see guys answer some of the questions that, I mean, I always think, people, they often go on about kind of, the public criticism and so on and so forth. I always think in these scenarios, I'm sure that the questions they're asking themselves inside are far more to the point and brutal than anything anybody outside could even conceive of saying to them or saying about them. So I'd imagine that the gauntlet, for want of a better word, will have been thrown down to a few of them in terms of, well, what do you really want from this season now? What do you want? Do you want Limerick, or do you want show us something better against Cork, and maybe it can be a springboard to something even better in another month's time?
I know it is only the league, but when you say springboard, this could really be a springboard.
Well, I mean, if Galway were to go to Cork and get a win and make a league final, those are two very important things. You'd have, in fact, indeed, you'd have two teams in the league final that could absolutely go hammer and tongs for it, because they're both kind of at a very similar stage of their development at the minute. And as we said earlier on, there's enough leeway between here and the Leinster Championship to give it a right good cut this weekend and another weekend. So absolutely, look, when you put it that way, it's probably more of a springboard in a way for Galway this particular game. I think if Cork get to the final, that's there's a different dynamic there again then in terms of going and winning a national title. But just this game in itself, yeah, it's for sure it's a springboard. But more importantly, again, like I would imagine lads will just be kind of going, well, look, I've got to hit some particular marks this weekend. If fellas didn't go well, the guys who didn't go particularly well on by their own assessment against Limerick will be going, oh, it's got to be better, and just see where that takes you.
It is the thing, Tom. Like, if you're looking from a goal perspective, Conor Whelan's a doubt, Daithí Burke's a doubt this weekend, Killian Trayers as well, who would have been playing for the ATU goal. Freshers picked up a nasty hamstring, so those three are definitely going to be out. But like, this could be huge in terms of Galway season. But even an encouraging performance could be huge here at the weekend, even if they were to come up short.
I think so. Like, in a way, you well, you want all your players available. Sometimes when your hand is forced to play younger players or players that might not necessarily be in the wrecking at the outset of the campaign, it proves better, because all of a sudden they're thrown in. They know that if they do well, then, 3 or 4 players are injured. Much like the Cork team, all of a sudden, Pat Ryan has opportunities. Seamus Henry hasn't been seen. Mark Coleman hasn't been seen. Conor Han picked up an injury. Robbie O'Flynn showed played in the All-Ireland final last year. He was in and out of the team the last couple of weeks. So, defenders, our Paddy Powers out injured, and he was definitely going to be a starter in my book. So there's an opportunity up in the forward line. So all of a sudden, like Galway, Cork have places to fill, and no better time than a de facto league semi-final on Saturday night down in Páirc, I suppose. And should they come up short, and I'm sure Micheál Donoghue would say, right, we've got what we wanted out of the league. We got down to the last day, qualification for a league final. Now it's into the Leinster Championship. Like Michael said there, if they do get to a league final and go on and win it, for example, then Galway fans and Galway players and mentors can say, okay, we've ticked the box here, we've won a league. we are going in the right direction. Will we get there this year? Maybe not. Maybe it'll be next year. Whereas on the other side of the coin, if Cork were to go on and beat Limerick or Galway, sorry, and go on and beat Tipperary in the league final, we wouldn't be known too much for our arrogance down in Cork, to be fair to us, but I'd imagine that will go through the roof if Cork won a National League title going into a Munster Championship. So you'll have Clare waiting in the long grass in Cusack Park in a month's time. So Pat Ryan and his selectors have this the way up also. But like I said at the outset, I can't see any reason why both these teams, Cork and Galway, don't go at it Saturday night and try to qualify for a league final. We had a teacher in school a number of years ago. He's now since retired, John McCarthy. I don't think he'd be listening to this, but he used to always say sometimes about skiing and scull matches that it might be a slow bicycle race. I hope this match Saturday night isn't a slow bicycle race in terms of both teams don't want to get to a league final. I think, given the history and tradition that Cork and Galway have, they will try and go for it Saturday night. And there's no reason whatsoever that a good performance and a good showing can do anything but stand to them later in the season.
Is there a bit of Yara creeping into Cork, a few Cork supporters now? No?
Area, I don't know. No, but look, as Michael said earlier on, Cork are probably further down the line. The following for them at the moment is incredible. I remember that match last year against Limerick. I was actually coming from my cousin's house in Glanmire, and I came down through Luke's Cross and that way down into the city. And the red and white, and even the green and white, the supporters, there was people everywhere. It was like a championship, or sorry, I know it was a championship match, but it was like real end of season championship stuff. Like there was people everywhere, and Cork just seemed to get a following after that. And a number of weeks ago, Diarmuid Healy got 1-5 against Kilkenny, and anytime he got the ball, the place nearly rose to occasion. It was such a fever with him. But at the end of the day, they still haven't crossed the line in terms of winning trophies. And that's where Cork will obviously want to go and address not winning in All-Ireland for 20 years. But I imagine Pat Ryan will still say we have a national trophy up for grabs here that we could win within the space of 15, 16 days from here. And that can't but do them good in terms of their preparation for championship. I suppose us on the outside can worry about the expectation that we're going to place on their shoulders, but from a player's perspective and management, they'll be worrying about what's happening in the white lines. And if Micheál O'Donoghue and his management team get to a league final win it, they may say we're ahead of where we want to be. But is that a bad thing? I don't think it is.
Michael, would you see Cork going as strong as possible this weekend?
Yeah. Why not? Like, I mean, they haven't really. I wouldn't say that they've been. I don't think they've been really holding back. It's kind of these games get played. Again, it goes back to based on fellas where they're at in the fitness profile, their injury profile, form, all that kind of stuff. Like there's no teams taking a pull. You know what I mean? You could look at Clare, like we said earlier, and say, well, a lot of guys were missing and all that. But no question that the fellas who were out in the field were giving it everything, because this is their chance to put themselves in the frame to actually get picked for championship, knowing that this other array of players are coming back. So I know I'd say Cork will just keep it going. Again, as I say, they're in that space that teams get into from time to time where they're contending and you want to get stuff over the line. You want to keep the momentum going. You want to keep the feel good going, but you need things like, like a league final, like a stepping stone or a signpost or whatever, the bigger trophies, if you can manage it. So, and also, I mean, I know this isn't stuff that I'm sure players, well, they don't necessarily, it's not something that stays in their mind too much, but you do want to actually, when you get the opportunity to win something, you want to win it. Like, I mean, Cork are 2 games away in this scenario, and so are Galway, from winning a league title. So why wouldn't you? Like, I mean, in 10 or so for some of them in 10 years time, or in less than a year or 2 years time, they'll be sitting back going, what did they, had great times, great memories. What did they win? Geez, we had a good shot at the league, but we didn't really follow through with it, maybe we should have. So there's all sorts of reasons like that for going for it. I can't see why at home with a boisterous crowd behind them who are expecting a show. I can't see why they wouldn't just push on. Again, like we've said, whatever way this game goes for both teams, it's not going to impact on their championship preparations unduly, barring injury and stuff like that. But that could happen anytime. So just drive on. Get to a league final. Like, I mean, a league final against Tip for either Cork or Galway will have a tasty sort of look about it. So Yeah, I'd imagine they'll tear into a pot.
And I imagine both of you aren't going to back Galway this weekend.
I suppose, Paul, I probably not. No, I think I'll tip Cork in the sense that I believe they've had a good week away of training. The performance against Clare, okay, we've spoke about how high up Cork were, how low down Clare were, I suppose. I imagine Pat Ryan, knowing Pat Ryan and his management team, they've been successful at under 20. Fergal Condon has managed an Achilles to three in a row a number of years ago. That, like Michael said there, that if there's a trophy up for grabs and there's a competition to win, they'll go all out for it. I'm sure Micheál Dunn will be the same, but for the reason of where Cork are in terms of their development, um, some of the players, the way they're playing at the moment, I think they might just have enough. But at the same time, I do expect Galway to give a very, very good account of themselves on Saturday night.
Tom, for you, going down through the years, who's your toughest opponent when you play Galway?
Um, I suppose the one thing, and I mean this with the high respect, that there was many players. Like, I won't say I'll single out one, but Galway were always strong and physical and well able to hurl. You know that it was a different style of hurling that you knew you were in a battle coming off the field against Galway. That they were strong men, they were able to hurl, they were able to play hurling, and they were able to move around the field as well. Um, so from that perspective, I wouldn't single out one. You know, in identifying who was the hardest Galway player. I always felt, you say, going up to Salt Hill, we say, given the wind coming off the Atlantic, it was always a very, very good test of where you were. That if you could go up to Galway and kind of prove yourself and play well and come off the field, okay, regardless of the result, but on a personal level, say, you know, I've done well here. I've held my own. Um, I've performed well against a good, strong Galway team. Then I'd be well prepared from championship later on in the summer. That it was always a difficult game for me. So I won't single out one player. I don't like singling out players too much because it's not fair, because it's a collective effort to be fair at the end of the day. But um, for me, like, you know, if I was marking Conor Cooney now at the weekend, I know I'd be in for a really tough physical battle. And if I came off the pitch knowing, okay, he might get a couple of scores off me, that I'm more than held my own, then I'd be quite happy moving on to a championship season saying, you know, I'm in a good place here.
And Michael, you expect Cork to win this weekend?
I thought you were going to ask me my most difficult Galway opponent. Anyway, we'll just let that one pass by. Yeah, I would. For again, for all the reasons that Tom mentioned there, I just think they're just a bit further down the road, bit more settled with things. And as I said earlier, I think the amount of competition that's in that Cork squad at the moment, given where they're at, is it's highly impressive, and they're all very, very good players. I mean, I saw there, I think it was Patrick Horgan said yesterday or today, he counted about 12 or 13 forwards going for six positions. And if you listed off the 12 or 13, including guys to come back, it's a good list. So, you know, when you have that kind of driving you on at this stage of their development, yeah, I think they'll have enough. Put it this way, it would be very interesting on one level if Galway were to win, to see what the reaction in Cork would be, because I think it would be, I think it would raise a lot of questions, depending on how the game went and stuff like that, but it could potentially raise a lot of questions for them a few weeks out. So back to your point about whether they go for it or not, just to kind of, at this stage, you also don't want to be shipping results that create any bit of turbulence within the group or without the group or outside the group as well, just for the sake of it. Like, just keep things on an even keel, just keep playing, get your results, move on. So I'd imagine Cork win, but I'd say there'll be a lot there. Whatever way it goes, there'll be a lot for Galway to take from it.
For sure. That is Galway Cork Saturday evening. The live game on RT this weekend. It gets underway at 7:30 in Páirc. That is all we do have time for on this evening's show. Thanks to Michael and Tom for coming on.